start with Brexit, because if you become Prime Minister, it will be the biggest task in front of you. You've said today Brexit is settled. Does that mean if you're Prime Minister, come hell or high water, whatever the deal on the table, we will be leaving the European Union?
Look, there was a clear vote at the referendum a year ago, but there is now the negotiations which have already begun. I sent a letter to President-elect Macron last night congratulating him on his election and also setting out in broad terms what our aims are in these negotiations. To have good relations with Europe, of course. Secondly, to make sure there is a trade access, a tariff-free trade access to European markets. Thirdly, that we will, of course, protect the rights of EU nationals living in Britain, which we will do straight away, and that we will also ensure that the regulations that we've got from the European Union, such as Working Time Directive and employment conditions, will be defended and maintained. And it has to be put very clearly. And
that is what you would hope to achieve. But on that specific point, if you say Brexit is settled, whatever happens in the negotiations, however well or badly they go, we would be leaving if you were Prime Minister.
We will go into the negotiations with a determination to achieve what I've just outlined. And it's not a one-off meeting, it's not a one-off discussion. It also involves relations with all the governments across Europe, in every one of the member states, as well as their parliaments and the European Parliament.
But forgive me, Jeremy
and the
Corbyn, that's not quite my question. My question is, if you're Prime Minister, we will leave come hell or high water, whatever is on the table at the end of the negotiations.
We win the election, we'll get a good deal with Europe. A good deal with Europe that will ensure that the very large number of manufacturing jobs in Britain that rely on trade with Europe won't suddenly find themselves under World Trade Organization rules where there will be a tariff wall put up immediately around this country.
But on that specific point, Jeremy Corbyn, few can predict how the negotiations will go, either for Theresa May.
The specific point is we're negotiating to gain that market access to Europe.
But you won't say then that we might potentially stay, or we might just to be completely clear, because people will want to know this. If you're Prime Minister, we will leave whatever happens.
People will know that there's been a referendum and a decision was made a year ago. We've set out very clear our terms for the negotiations. Keir Starmer has built those relationships across Europe, and that is what we'll be pursuing with the European Union. I don't know any more than you do exactly what is going to happen in the future on this, but I do know we are not approaching this from megaphone diplomacy, we're not approaching this from threats, we're not proposing to set up some kind of tax haven on the shores of the European Union. We're serious about these negotiations.
But forgive me, Jeremy Corbyn, this is a very important point to lots of people. As you say, we don't know what will happen in the negotiations. If you are Prime Minister, can you categorically say that we would definitely leave? Because if you won't, there is a chink of a possibility that things could change and we might end up looking differently at our options.
The danger is of the approach the Conservatives are taking in their megaphone diplomacy with Europe and approaching the whole thing as though all you've got to do is shout loud and be abusive to people across the channel. Our view is you have to talk to them, negotiate with them, and recognise there is actually quite a lot of common interest, particularly in manufacturing industry. That is the process we're following.
So you won't address that point specifically?
We are negotiating a trade arrangement with Europe and protection of the things that we've gained from the European Union.